Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be calling the meeting to order.
That means it's on.
I'd like to have a reading of the meeting notice, please.
The Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Erie, Pennsylvania, and the Board of Directors of the City of Erie Regional Career and Technical School will meet in regular session on Wednesday, February 18, 2015, in the auditorium at East High School, 1001 Atkins Street, at 6:00 p.m. by request of the President, Robert S. Casillo.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair? Here. Mr. Petrunger?
Here.
Ms. Shenley?
Here.
Mr. Spagel?
Here.
Mrs. Alexandrovich? Mr. Brzezinski?
Here.
Mr. Fabrizi?
Excused.
Thank you. Mr. Harkins?
Here.
And Mr. Casillo.
Present. Thank you. Tonight we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Joanna Rodriguez, a sixth grade student from Deal Elementary, introduced by Mr. Dana Gilmore, the principal, followed by a moment of silence for Walter Hatt, I beg your pardon, retired bus driver and laborer who passed away on January 19, 2015. Evelyn Carmazon Antolik, who a retired cafeteria worker who passed away on January 29th. Mr. Chester Witkowski, retired teacher who passed away on February 3rd. Mr. Thomas Yacobosi, retired teacher who passed away on December 30th, 2014. Ms. Rosemary Babe Hayes, retired cafeteria worker who passed away on February 6th, 2015. Ms. Marie Bolitnikoff, a retired teacher assistant who passed away on February 9th. And Mr. Stanley Markowitz, a retired custodian who passed away on February 2nd, 2015. And Anthony John Padavani Jr., a retired custodian who passed away on the 14th of February. So with that,
good evening, members of the board, Dr. Badams, members of the administration and the community. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Deal School sixth grade student, Miss Joanna Rodriguez. Her grandmother is Magdalia Rodriguez, and Joanna is joined by two brothers that attend Deal, Luis Rodriguez and Alfredo Rodriguez. Joanna is a type of student that really enjoys our CFES program at Deal School. She also states that Deal is a very friendly school and has the best teachers and principals, and I did not solicit the principal comment. Her favorite subjects are math, science, and writing. And this is something pretty neat about Joanna. She won first place in the MLK essay contest for this current academic year, so that's a nice recognition for her. Joanna likes basketball and will try out for the team this year. She also enjoys reading for pleasure and creative writing. Joanna always approaches people with a smile on her face and is a pleasure to have in our school. And when I asked Joanna what she wants to be when she grows up, she states that she wants to attend college and major in nursing. She would love to work as a nurse at a doctor's office. So I think that's just one example of the many good students we have at Deal, and in particular in the Erie School District as a whole.
thank you. Will you all please rise?
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the moment of silence.
Thank you. Congratulations, Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is Thank you again, Joanna. Nice job.
Hey, Mr. President,
Sir.
thank the powers that be. Our lame eagle is fixed.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Someone knocked it over. I don't know who it was. Pardon? Yeah. Well, it is repaired. Thank you, Mr. Brzezinski. At this time, I'd like to introduce our student representative, Tim Kernowen.
Colonel.
Thank you. Is a senior at Central Career and Technical School and is the son of Heather Kernowen. He is the middle of 5 children. Tim's 2 eldest siblings are graduates, and his youngest 2 siblings are attending grade school. Tim is in the computer IT shop, is ranked number 1 in his class. Tim participates in the Penn State Educational Partnership Program and is the head of the robotics team at Central Tech. He participates in the Northwest Tri-County Intermediate Unit, number 5 Talent Search, is the president of the Central Tech chapter of Skills USA. He enjoys programming and is an active member of his community, having over 60 hours of community service in just his senior year. Timothy plans on attending Penn State University Park in the fall of 2015 for the engineering program. Tim, before you leave, I'd like for you to teach me computers. So I'm just kidding. Would you have anything you'd like to say today?
No, sir.
Well, okay. Again, welcome and thank you, Tim. I want to announce the executive session that were held on February 11th and 18th, 2015. I'm sorry. Oh, we didn't have an executive session this evening. Okay. So February 11th, we had executive session. The next is the hearing of citizens. Persons desiring to speak for 5 minutes must submit their request in writing to the Secretary's office at least 1 week prior to the board meeting. All others may speak 3 minutes. Our 5-minute speakers are, well, we have one, Mr. William McDonald, speaking on the topic of Erie School District business. Mr. McDonald, are you here? Mr. McDonald? Okay, not coming forward. We can then go to the next, which is the 3-minute speakers. Anyone wishing to address the board, you have 3 minutes, and that will be allotted to you. When you do, come to the podium, state your name, and print your name and address on the tablet that's provided at the podium. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and speak to the board? Not seeing anyone, we'll go to the next portion of the meeting. That would be the reports of committees and liaisons. Do we have anyone on the board that would like to address? Angela? Ms. McNair?
I just wanted to briefly mention that we're in the planning stages for our next Better Together, which will hopefully be in March. So just wanted to mention that briefly and say thank you to the team members that are helping to plan that and putting that together.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any other reports from directors? Okay. Next on the agenda would be the unfinished business, which we have none.
Could I have a motion for the reports of the committee and the liaisons tonight?
Yes, you certainly may. So I would like to have a motion to accept the reports.
So be it. Second.
Do we have, be Mr. Petrunger, seconded by Mr. Spiegel. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair? Mr. Petrunger?
Yes.
Ms. Shenley? Yes. Mr. Spiegel?
Yes.
Mrs. Alexandrovich? Yes. Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Yes. Next, we deal with new business.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, who is that? Mr. Harkins.
if you
Thank
allow, I make a motion, we approve item 5, the new business of the school district, item 6, the new business supplemental of the school district, and item 7, the new business career and technical of the school district.
All right, we have a motion to accept items 5 through 7 in new business. We have a second by Ms. Shenley. Who had the motion, Tom? Mr. Spiegel? Oh, okay. John. Mr. Harkins. All right. Does that require a roll call, or is that by voice?
Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair? Mr. Petrunger?
Yes.
Ms. Shenley? Mr. Spiegel?
Yes.
Mrs. Alexandrovich? Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Yes. Item 8 is dealing in separations. That was submitted by Mr. Petrunger.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr.
I move
Harkins.
we adopt the preliminary budget, accept and adopt the preliminary budget as presented in this booklet.
All right, we have a motion to accept item 8.
Second.
Mr. Harkins,
Let me try this time.
seconded by Mr. Brzezinski. Any discussion?
Mr. Cassillo?
Yes.
I just want to explain again, obviously the board's aware of this, having been through this painful process so many times before, that the adoption of the proposed preliminary budget really signals the start of the hard work that lies ahead over the course of the next 4 months in actually trying to find ways for us to close the $7.4 million gap that we've identified as we head into the process. So while the board is contemplating a suggested revenue increase of $1 million of additional tax, that does not mean that tonight's vote imposes a $1 million tax increase on our citizens. So I just want to make that point extremely clear, and I want to also share with the audience and the public that the board has been very clear in directing the administration to do all things necessary to avoid the imposition of that additional millage.
Thank you, Dr. Bottoms. Any further discussion?
Yes,
Yes,
Mr.
Tom.
President, just wondering, so on Saturday when we have a board retreat, we'll be going through this in detail. And we'll also be hearing and discussing different ways that we can decrease the budgets. Is that part of the
Yes.
agenda for that?
Yes, it is. As I understand it, that's going to be the agenda. Yes.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Petrunger.
the reason I separated this, I understand the intentions of it, but I can't in good nature. That's why I separated it, was so I could be able to vote on it, and I don't even want to see that in there as a tax increase, and that's the only reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on item 8.01? None being heard. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair? Mr. Petrunger?
No.
Ms. Shenley? Yes. Mr. Spiegel?
Yes.
Mrs. Alexandrovich? Yes. Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Cassillo?
Yes. Next, I would like to have a motion to approve the minutes. We have a motion to approve the minutes. Motion by Mr. Petrunger, seconded by Mr. Spiegel. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The next item, the approval of the bills and payroll, item 10. May I have a motion to approve the bills and payroll, please?
So be it.
Motion by Mr. Petrunger, seconded by Mr. Spiegel. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair? Mr. Petrunger?
Yes.
Ms. Shenley? Yes. Mr. Spiegel?
Yes.
Mrs. Alexandrovich? Yes. Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Yes. Next, we have the report of our superintendent, Dr. Badams.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo.
You're welcome.
Again, I want to thank everyone who's attended the meeting tonight. It's great to see so many people here to watch the board carry out its business. And I truly appreciate the attendance of all the teachers who've come out on a quite chilly evening, and want to express to you on behalf of the board and the administration just how much we value the hard work that you do. I also want to acknowledge that because we continue to negotiate a teaching contract, I think it's important for us all to recognize that, yeah, that's the business that we have to do with one another in order to establish our compensation and so forth. But I want to say that in no way does that at all change the high esteem that I think this board and our community has for all of our teachers. You work against, in many cases, extremely challenging odds. You're helping students who are coming from some situations that are, well, insurmountable in some cases. Extreme poverty, the challenges of little support sometimes in their communities and neighborhoods, and yet you come every single day and give it your best. So I want to thank all of you. I also want to point out that within the new business this evening, there's an important addition to our staff, or a future addition to our staff. And as it was already reported, and as I already shared with the district, Mr. Rick DeAndre has indicated that it's his decision to retire at the end of this particular fiscal year. It's been really, I don't know how I would have gotten through the past 5 years without Rick's help and guidance as we've navigated some of the most difficult financial times in the district's history. Also, though, I want to recognize that although the idea of replacing Rick has really been a major problem that I've contemplated over the course of the last year or so, I want to point out that we have the really good fortune of having the opportunity to hire Mr. Brian Polito, who, as of the conclusion of tonight's meeting, will now be our future CFO, who will take over Rick's duties after Rick retires, and will join us May 1st so that we can have a smooth transition of all the vital business functions that are so integral to the work that we do. So with that, since we also are passing a proposed preliminary budget, I want to sort of share with the community exactly where we're starting and where we have to end up. So without further ado, I think it's important for everyone to understand just what the Erie community is facing in terms of its economic condition, and put our overall school district budget in context. A lot of these statistics are well known to those of us here in the district. Those of you who are viewing on Channel 8 may or may not know that we have 11,740 students who are attending 18 schools that are staffed by 1,315 employees. The district also has authorized, or is dealing with state-authorized charter schools that amount to 13 different entities. Erie, unlike Pennsylvania, has 27.8% of its residents living in poverty. That's according to the actual poverty index, and we all know that number is actually a pretty low threshold, that people that are making much more than that poverty level index are still struggling. But Erie has more than twice the state's rate of poverty. Our free and reduced lunch population is 80% at this point. We educate students with special needs at the rate of 18%, and our fastest growing segment of our population are our English language learners, who now account for 10%. 1 in every 10 of our students have some other language as their primary language. Financially, our current general fund budget this year is $149.8 million. Current millage rate is 16.62, which equates to about 2.4 million. Each mill accounts for about $2.4 million. Oh, okay. Carry the slide forward. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. In Erie, it's interesting. The PA median home value is $164,000, and we're just a little over half of that at $83,800. for the Erie median home value. Interesting, the wealth of our community is such that when you think about the fact that over 60% of our budget comes from state funding, it's very difficult to raise taxes on the remainder of our population. It's just difficult to generate significant amounts of money from residential property tax and even from income tax. The median Erie household income is $33,000 and the PA median is $52,000. So I guess the main point I want to impress on everyone here is that right now, at least according to our last AFR data that's available for anyone to check, to cross-reference on the PDE website, our current per pupil spending is less than our peer districts. And when I say peer districts, I'm talking about places like Allentown, Reading, Lancaster, Scranton. Our per pupil spending is less than that group of districts by 7.1%. It's less than the rest of the county by 5.6%, and it's below state average by 19%. Now that efficiency comes at a high price. We all know what we've been through over the course of the past 5 years. We've had to furlough staff, we've had to close buildings, and we've had to take the community through all the trauma that those things represent. We've had to severely trim programs and services, and all that has put us at the bottom of the list in terms of the amount of money that we're able to spend on our students. We are doing more with less, and if you look at the rest of the state, our per pupil cost puts us at 448 out of 500 Pennsylvania school districts. We are spending less than 89% of the districts in our Commonwealth. Think about that. Now, the state right now is looking at a new funding formula. We're dealing with a lot of unfunded mandates that are costing us an incredible amount of money and taking money away from our schools and our programs where they are so desperately needed. Erie is now lean administratively. Our administrative per pupil spending, again, from the same AFRs publicly available, is 14.6% less than our urban peer districts, 8.3% less than the county average, and 13.5% less than state average. Someone else should be doing this slideshow for me. Am I caught up yet? There we go. Even though we've become really, really good at doing more with less, we're in danger of bankruptcy. And we're not alone. Districts that are considerably more affluent than us because of so many, again, unfunded costs that districts are forced to shoulder are also facing bankruptcy. And a soon-to-be released report done statewide will show that really when we get further in the future, 2017-18, you'll start to see a number of districts that can no longer make payroll, which is how the state generally decides whether a district is in need of takeover and receivership. No matter what we do, our annual expenses continue to rise at a rate that's greater than our ability to raise revenue. So even if the board chose to raise taxes to the absolute maximum they're allowed, and even if we went after exceptions to Act 1, we could not raise enough revenue to cover even our increase in pension contributions. So as far as that annual budget gap that we face, now we're moving forward on the assumption that we're going to have the same revenue that we had last year. As everyone in this room knows, the net effect of the state's policies over the course of the past several years has really been a reduction in our funding. Money that was counted by the prior administration as additional funding to school districts, in our case, was additional reimbursement for our pension costs, neglecting the fact that they increased our pension costs by a tremendous amount. Charter school payments are budgeted to be increased by $3.5 million this year. That'll bring our overall cost for charter schools to over $20 million. Now, when I talk about unfunded mandates, the state chose to not fund the charter school reimbursement line that was part of the original charter law since the first year of the Corbett administration. That at least gave us some relief to try to offset some of the costs that the district continues to bear when one student from one school attends to charter school, 2 or 3 students from another school attend, and we can't reduce our expenses to make up for those lost students. That reimbursement subsidy that we used to get at least helped to alleviate a little bit of that lost revenue. Since it's been gone, that's a cost that we simply cannot continue to bear. $20 million of our budget. That's how much we spend for our entire health insurance program, is going out the door to charter schools. Again, I've talked already about our mandated PSERS pension contributions. They're going to go up to more than 25% in the upcoming budget. That's 25% of our total payroll will be forwarded to Harrisburg because the pension fund is underfunded to the tune of well over $30 billion at the state level. This is a problem that the state needs to deal with and stop kicking down the road and stop pushing back on the local school districts to make up the difference. None of us can afford it. Our local taxpayers can't afford to shoulder that additional burden, and it's a problem that needs to be addressed. Our health insurance costs are rising by about $500,000. That's our anticipated increase. That's actually not that high of an increase given what it's been in previous years. But nonetheless, the cost of health care does continue to rise. And then one thing that often doesn't get factored into budgets is the fact that inflation is a real phenomenon. The consumer price index means that the cost of goods and services increases each year, and it's ranged anywhere from actually sometimes flat to as high as 3% in recent years. So that's, again, an additional $500,000 we can anticipate as we head into this next budget year. So all of this makes for that $7.4 million gap that we're attempting to deal with this coming year, and that we're going to work together to try to figure out a way to close. And we're going to do all this like we've been for the past several years, trying not to damage educational programming, trying not to return to the days of mass furloughs and staff reductions, trying not to close buildings, and trying not to raise taxes. And essentially, we're going to tie both hands behind our back and blindfold ourselves to try to narrow this gap. But we have to find ways to reduce our expenses because we can't count on additional revenue from the state. So, speaking about revenue, now we can't count on additional help from the state, but we certainly can hope for additional revenue from the state. The result of our recent gubernatorial election brought us Governor Wolf, who campaigned very heavily on restoring public education to what I believe its proper status should be, seen as a true value and not the enemy of our economy, seen as the source for workforce development and for molding good citizens and for creating a healthy, thriving neighborhoods and economies. With that said, he's got a massive budget problem of his own to deal with, and we're certainly very hopeful that he'll find ways to make good on some of the intentions that he shared with us about restoring funding to public education. We're hopeful. So March 3rd, when he presents his budget, we'll be watching and waiting to see how he's going to make that happen. We'll also be watching our legislators very closely to see that they are able to collaborate with him to find a way to restore proper funding to Erie's public schools, but also to the Commonwealth's public schools. And our budget is very heavily dependent on state funding. Over 60% of our funds come from state sources. Only about 35.5% come from our local property taxes. Again, so when we have these very large budget gaps, it's impossible to expect our local taxpayers to be able to fill that void. Even if, like I said, even if we tax to the maximum every single year. In terms of our expenses, the bulk of our costs obviously are our people on whom we rely. There are a certain number of areas within our budget that we simply can't trim. When we look at areas like our tuition to other schools, our charter school costs, our debt service, those are things that are pretty far beyond our capability to control. There are some small areas within the budget, however, areas like contracted services, utilities, that we actually do have some latitude, and we have some people, in fact, some of our own staff members. I can call out Dorian Petrie, for example, who has worked with students to find ways to carry out energy audits and actually save us tens of thousands of dollars simply by our behavior around energy conservation. But those sorts of efforts, again, will save us tens of thousands of dollars, not the multiple millions of dollars we need to properly close the budget gap. So I'm sure you, as well as I, will all be watching intently when Governor Wolf presents his budget proposal on March the 3rd. We're also very optimistic in looking at what's going on around the state in terms of this collective awareness that even the funding formula itself, the very funding formula that determines how state money is to be parceled out to the various school districts, is under intensive review right now. I had the privilege of testifying recently when the commission came to Greenville to share our plight, but it was sort of like an echo. It seems that every other superintendent that spoke, whether they were from a rural district or from another city, had the same tale to tell. They had the same admonishment to the legislators that were on that commission, that it's not just the formula, it's not just how the pie is divided, but it's the size of the pie that will make the biggest difference in the outlook for all of our schools in the Commonwealth. It's things like fixing the charter school funding situation that we have in this state. Right now, the fact that a cyber school with arguably at most half the overhead of a traditional school is funded at the same level as a traditional school. The fact that reality has persisted as long as it has is shameful. When two auditor generals have issued very detailed and very well-researched reports cataloging how badly the taxpayers are being misused and how unfair it is to school districts to be paying as much as we are for virtual education. And again, I've already belabored the pension point, but the pension situation does need to be addressed. They need to figure out how to properly fund the promises that have been made to all the educators and state employees over the years and revise that moving forward so that it becomes sustainable. So as we look forward for the work this board has to do, we do have to now roll up our sleeves and figure out how we're going to approach this budget. Our proposed final budget is due on May 27th, and then our final budget is due to be approved on June 24th. I'm sure people out there have ideas of ways we can continue to save money. I have a meeting scheduled to meet with anyone who's willing to attend from the staff this coming Monday at Deal School, after school, around 3:30, to just have an open discussion about our budget situation. We were approached by the EEA to share some ideas that they had about trimming costs, and I felt had a very positive meeting this past week, and we'll continue to have that door open to think of other ways that we might be able to work together to figure out how we can continue to do more with less. And we'll do all of this in the hope that the state gets it right and properly funds its public schools. So that concludes my superintendent's report and also this budget update. And again, I look forward to working with all of you to continue to do more with less.
Thank you, Dr. Battams.
I move we accept the report of the superintendent.
We have a motion by Mr. Harkins.
Eddie seconded.
Mr. Brzezinski seconded. Roll call, or that's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Not hearing any opposition. Moving on to the next. The report of the secretary.
Will we approve that?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Harkins, seconded by Mr. Petrunger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Petrunger?
Yes.
Ms. Shenley? Mr. Spiegel,
Yes.
Mrs. Alexandrovich, Mr. Brzezinski,
Yes.
Mr. Harkins.
Yes.
Mr. Castillo.
Yes. The next on the agenda is the award of bids. That would be the award on bids for 2016 Bluebird 32-passenger school activity bus. May I have a motion to accept the bid?
So moved.
It's a tie.
I'll second it.
Mr. Harkins moved, Mr. Petrunger seconded. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McNair. Mr. Petrunger.
Yes.
Ms. Shenley.
Yes.
Mr. Spiegel.
Yes.
Mrs. Alexandrovich. Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes.
Mr. Harkins.
Yes.
Mr. Castillo.
Yes. At this point, is there any other matter that the board would like to speak on?
Mr. Castillo?
Dr. Badams?
I'd like, now that the vote is over and we're just about to conclude, I do want to introduce Mr. Brian Polito, who on May 1st will join us as our new Chief Financial Officer. So please welcome Brian Polito.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry.
I-
Mr. Harkins.
when you're ready. A month ago, I brought up a question here that was asked of me by a retired, one of our school administrators retired, and that was, what are our students learning about civics, government, and public affairs? I was worried and I didn't have the answer because I had lost track of where we were with that, and I was afraid we had lost some ground and maybe those subjects weren't as stressed as they once were. But Tammy Smith gave us a report in our committee of the whole meeting last week. For those who weren't there and for the public's input, the good news was it's still required in each year of high school. A social studies class is a required class. The civics class gave away to world cultures in 9th grade. I should have known that. That happened while I was here. And in 12th grade, what used to be problems of democracy is now a government class, and during which the kids are exposed to lessons on how their government works, how to be involved, what their citizens' responsibilities are, and it walked them up to the point of registering them to vote. So it was a good news answer to a question that concerned this retired administrator and myself, and just as when Mr. Brzezinski and some other board members recently raised the question about whether we had abandoned cursive writing, we were pleased to find out that we have not completely abandoned that it's still available for instruction and is being instructed. And the good news here is the answer Ms. Smith gave us was that the 9th through 12th grades are required of social studies, including lessons in civic involvement. So it was good news, and I wanted to report back because it was given at a committee meeting and everyone might not have heard that.
Thank you, Mr. Harkins. Any other director? Mr. Brzezinski.
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about probably one of the true spirits of East High School. I didn't say anything at the beginning because there was a list of folks who we lost. But Chet Witkowski was Mr. Math at East High, way back in the days before Miss Andrews even. Robin remembers that. Chet Witkowski was one fantastic guy. He lived a long time. I wish he would have lived longer. Everybody who knew him will miss him for sure. Pat Hart especially. Anyway, I just needed to take a minute to say something about Chet because he was a great guy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brzezinski. Anyone else? No, I just want to make one comment. Dr. Badams did speak on the importance of the political arena and how it's going to equate to the locally, the Erie School District. I invite and challenge each and every one of us to contact your legislators and emphasize the importance of the funding for public education. It's going to be a concerted effort, but the politicians need to understand that this is so important, not for today, but moving forward, so that the Erie public can once again focus on curriculum and education versus being straddled by our budget woes. So I invite you all to take an active role, move forward with that, and contacting your legislatures, your state legislatures, and your congressmen to talk to them about the necessary federal funding that would help this district. So with that, being no further business, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So be it.
We have a motion, Mr. Petrunger, seconded by Mr. Spiegel. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Meeting adjourned.
What do you think?